So is that new trove of information revealing fresh dangers for Americans around the world? I put that question to the President's National Security Advisor, Tom Donilon. Mr. Donilon, thank you for joining us. Firstly, the pictures that have just come out, you've seen them. What do they tell us that we didn't know about Osama bin Laden?
I think the principal thing to take away is that he was engaged not in just being a symbolic leader of al-Qaeda, but he was involved in strategic and operational leadership. And let me say just a couple of things about this. Number one, the information was recovered as part of the operation on Sunday night. In addition to taking out Osama bin Laden on Sunday night, our special forces who were trained in this area gathered up as much information as they could before they left the compound.
How much?
Well, it's a very large cache.
How would you describe it in terms of its largeness?
I'd say two things about it. It's the single largest cache of information that we've gotten from a senior terrorist, number one. And number two, the CIA is describing it to us as the size of a small college library. Have
you found any imminent threat right now? Anything that should give concern right now that you're working to counter and neutralize?
I don't have anything to tell you this morning, but as we develop those, obviously we'll go about the notifications in the appropriate way.
Because al-Qaeda has said, we accept that he's dead and we are going to avenge that.
Yeah.
Is there any worry, any fear, any plan that you know of, and are you taking any specific measures to counter any imminent threat?
Well, we thought about that a lot prior to the action, and what I can tell you is this, and the President said it in his address to the nation on Sunday night, this is the most significant achievement we've had in our efforts against al-Qaeda. At the end of last year, we assessed and made public this assessment that the pressure in al-Qaeda had driven them to the point where they were as weak as they had been at any time since 2001. This is a really serious blow to them. There's a milestone on our way to strategic defeat. Having said that, we need to remain vigilant, and we will remain vigilant, and we certainly had thought about that a lot prior to the actions that we took on Sunday.
Let me ask you about the killing of Osama bin Laden. What was the nature of his resistance?
He didn't surrender, right, and moved away from our forces, right, you know. And at that point, he's a threat to our forces, given the techniques that we know, and our forces made an absolutely appropriate judgment.
Let me ask you this, though, because it goes to the central part of the story, the success of this mission. You had to, sort of correct some of the storylines at the beginning. You've said that the President went down and had A to Z conversation with the Special Forces. Do you think, in retrospect, would you have done it differently? Would you have allowed that complete briefing of the people who had done it before giving out information?
As you know from covering many of these events, initial reports can sometimes be inaccurate, right, and need to be corrected. And as soon as the information was refined and was corrected, the administration put that out. You know, when I looked at the picture the other day, the famous picture now of us in the Situation Room, looked at it yesterday, I had tried to reflect on it a little bit, and my eyes went to the President, and we ask a tremendous amount of our presidents, including these kinds of decisions. And this, a week ago Thursday evening, he got his last briefing on this in the Situation Room. And he got divided counsel, frankly.
Divided?
Absolutely. As you would expect.
Dissension?
Divided counsel, people recommending different options.
Because it's been written dissension amongst the ranks.
I wouldn't call it dissension. I would call it a divided counsel. That people were in favor of different options. And I've served 3 presidents, as you know. You watched the President take this in. He had chaired 5 National Security Council meetings in 6 weeks. Take all that in, say, I'm not going to make my decision now. I'll tell you my decision tomorrow. Stand up, walk out of the Situation Room, go down that colonnade that you know so well by the Rose Garden to his residence and make that decision. And this is what we ask of our President. And I think in this case, the President was well served by the process and will well served by his decision.
As you know, there are many in the Republican Party, many former Bush administration officials. The Attorney General of the Bush administration wrote in the Wall Street Journal that, quite frankly, it was the Bush policies that led to this success, that the enhanced interrogation methods were pretty much the thing that led to you all finding Osama bin Laden, and that President Obama's decision to do away with enhanced interrogation will mean that it'll be very difficult, if at all possible, to get these kinds of intelligence again. So do you think then that you should reinstate harsh interrogation?
No. In fact, I can't really, and won't, frankly, get into specific pieces of intelligence that led to the raid on Abbottabad. But what I will say further, though, is that no single piece of intelligence that was gathered many years ago or in the interim. No single piece of intelligence led to this success. It was hundreds of pieces of intelligence, and that's how these cases are put together, as you know, over time. And it was across 2 administrations. When President Obama was told that our forces were safely back in Afghanistan, the first person he called outside the White House was President Bush.
How badly is your relationship with Pakistan damaged because of this? I mean, we've heard Leon Panetta, we've heard others say, I mean, they were either incompetent or they were involved. We didn't tip them off because they would have tipped off the target. I mean, what are you going to do to restore and to fix this relationship?
Let me say 2 or 3 things about that.
Actually, first I want to understand,
of course.
Do you believe that elements of either the government or the military or the intelligence knew and harbored Osama bin Laden?
Let me address that directly. As I sit here with you, I don't have any information that would indicate foreknowledge by the political, military, or intelligence leadership in Pakistan, point 1. Point 2, though, is the fact that Osama bin Laden was living, and we now know operating, in a town 35 miles away from Islamabad, in what is essentially a military town of sorts, with an important institution and other military installations. Yes, yeah. So questions, and these questions, as you know, are being raised quite aggressively in Pakistan.
Well, what are you demanding of them now?
And they indicated, and out of the Corps Commanders meeting that General Kiani had this past Thursday, have indicated they're going to do an investigation. They need to do an investigation.
Should heads roll?
Well, that will be up to them with respect to their own
process. But can you deal with these very people who you've had to deal with?
Well, let's go through that. Yeah, I think though on this issue, we need to work with them on a couple of things. First of all, we need to know how this happened, and they need to know how this happened if they weren't involved, right? They need to know how this happened. Secondly, we need to work with them on assessing all the evidence out of that compound and all the evidence associated with Osama bin Laden's presence there for 6 years. They have in their custody all the non-combatants from the compound, including 3 wives of Osama bin Laden. We've asked for access, obviously, to those folks. They took additional materials. We talked at the first about the materials that we have. They had additional materials. We need access to that. But I would be remiss if I didn't make another point. More people have died, right? More terrorists have died and been captured, excuse me, on Pakistan soil than any place else in the world. They have been an essential partner of ours in the war against al-Qaeda and in our efforts against terrorism. And that really can't be dismissed. This is an important relationship for the United States. So we need to assess this, Christian, in a cool and calm way. And my job as National Security Advisor is to do this in a way that advances our interest.
If today the president had to make that decision to go after Zawahiri in Pakistan, would you tell the Pakistanis?
Well, we'd have to look at the specifics of the operation. This really wasn't a matter of trusting or not trusting. It was a matter of operational security.
So would you do this again then in Pakistan, go in without telling them?
It would depend on the operation, right? It would depend on the risk assessments, right? We do many, many joint operations with the Pakistanis. This was a singular operation, a very unique operation. Indeed, the most important military operation that we've undertaken in a long, long time.
I have to ask you a final question.
Of course.
You talked about the death of Osama bin Laden as a huge milestone on your mission to defeat al-Qaeda.
Yes.
Your Afghanistan policy is about defeating al-Qaeda.
Yes.
Does this mean that you will withdraw more troops?
Well, what it means is this.
Because people are saying that now.
Yeah, I understand. It is it's an important milestone towards strategic defeat, and it's an important step towards achieving our goals. And the President has laid out quite clearly and worked with our allies on this that we'll begin a withdrawal in July
Will you bring more than you had expected?
We haven't made those determinations yet, is the absolute honest answer.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And you can find more of that interview with Tom Donilon, the National Security Advisor, online, including about the way forward in Libya.